I want to begin this episode by saying some more sensitive things out loud. The things that so many CEOs and executive directors are thinking but rarely admit. This is the first of a two-part series because this conversation deserves space. It deserves nuance and it deserves honesty. My goal is simple. I want you to feel seen. I want you to feel heard. And as a former executive director myself for nearly 10 years, I understand this role in my bones. I know what it feels like to carry a certain level of responsibility quietly. And I know what it feels like to second guess every word coming out of your mouth while still showing up strong for everyone else. And last year, I conducted a research project. So these next two episodes are going to be revealing the results of that project from an aggregated, confidential perspective and let you know what I heard personally from nonprofit leaders across multiple sectors, from different missions, different budgets, different stages of growth. And I asked each of these executive directors and CEOs the same set of questions about their greatest challenges and their deepest desires in their role and in their organization. And the purpose was for me to serve them better. And what emerged was not just a collective of isolated frustrations, it was a pattern. And in these next two episodes, I'm going to share this data with you, not as theory, not as advice, but as reflection and shared identity. Because the consistency of what I heard was deeply revealing. And when you hear it, I believe you will feel less alone. And together, we're going to humanize what it actually feels like to lead the sector in this moment in time. Welcome to Nonprofit CEO Spark, the podcast for bold leaders ready to navigate growth and change with energy and confidence. I'm Marcia Beckner, nonprofit founder, former executive director, and culture strategist with nearly 20 years in the social impact world. Each week, I help nonprofit leaders stop spinning out, set boundaries, and design inclusive cultures where all staff can thrive. If you're ready to reignite your leadership without sacrificing your well-being, hit subscribe and let's spark your next chapter together. So here's the exact language nonprofit leaders shared with me. See if you can relate at any level. They said, I'm not always totally aligned with my board. They sometimes hinder, not help. It takes time to build the board we want. They say the staff feel whiplashed in a turnaround phase. They're tired of change, or I don't want to admit the things I don't know. That was a big one. And also, right now, we've been thrown into a lot of uncertainty. Those were direct statements, not dramatic or exaggerated, but just honest. And I'm so grateful for the courage that these participants shared with me. So what I want you to hear is this. These are not isolated feelings or experiences. They are sector-wide patterns. And so if you felt any of that, the fatigue, the misalignment, the self-doubt, the quiet pressure to have answers, you are not alone in that experience. You are operating inside a system that has been under strain for years. And so let's dive deeper into these identity level challenges that CEOs and executive directors are having right now. When the leaders shared, we are tired of change, what they are naming was the quiet exhaustion that comes from asking your team to pivot, again and again and again. I know that that's a COVID, term feels like pivot, but like it never ends, right? And our social impact sector has not had the luxury of steady conditions. We do not operate in stable markets with predictable margins. We operate within living systems. Funding shifts with policy. Community needs evolve, sometimes overnight. Staff transitions happen faster than succession plans can keep up. Boards cycle in and out. Strategic plans that felt solid 18 months ago suddenly require more revision. So what's happening is that change itself is not an interruption in our sector, it is the baseline. And that means that one of the most important reframes for CEOs and executive directors is this: if evolution will always be our norm, how do we lead in a way that protects what matters most while intentionally saying no to what does not matter? Because without clarity around this, everything feels urgent, and this is what leads to the burnout in the sector. Leaders are caring more than they should. Something that someone revealed to me, a participant revealed to me, was a key person leaves now and then another person is covering. The sentence sounds simple, but it carries so much weight. When someone leaves, you don't just lose labor, you lose that institutional knowledge. You lose relational continuity with donors, partners, or clients. And you lose the rhythm of how things were done and even the informal knowledge that never quite made it into the handbook. And if the person who leaves is a fundraising leader, especially a high-performing one, the financial impact can be immediate and destabilizing. Sometimes a development associate steps into leadership without adequate support, and sometimes often you yourself absorb it. I recently worked with a client who for a few months was wearing 3 hats at once: executive director, development director, and program director. 3 separate leadership functions all layered into one human being. And when she told me that she had finally hired both her new development director and a new program director, she laughed and said, "Now I only have one job." Only one job. We both smiled at that because in our nonprofit sector, only one job can still mean working 50 plus hours a week if we're not careful with board management, fundraising oversight, staff development, community relationships, and strategic planning. So no one here is sipping cocktails on the beach because they finally reduced their 3 executive roles into one. But that moment when she moved from absorbing everything to redistributing responsibility was pivotal. Then there's board alignment. A lot of the research participants I talked to did say things to the tune of, "I'm not always aligned with my board. They sometimes hinder, not help you. And it takes time to build the board you want." And for most CEOs and executive directors I know, effectively engaging their board is one of the most complex parts of the job. I'm thinking of a client of mine who inherited what she described as a friends and family board from the founder. People who loved the mission, people who believed in her, but people who had never really been asked to function as a governance or fundraising board. And as the organization grew, the expectations of the board grew too. The budget expanded, the staffing model grew more complex, and the strategy required sharper oversight. But the board structure remained the same. And so she found herself in this awkward in-between place, actively trying to transition toward a governance and fundraising board while still honoring the people who helped build the organization in the first place. And that transition takes time and patience. It takes emotional intelligence, and it takes a strategic recruitment plan. Many boards genuinely do not understand their fiscal responsibilities. They don't understand oversight versus operations, and they sometimes do not understand what healthy governance looks like as it's scaling. The same client told me something that stopped her mid-sentence. "I've never gotten a performance evaluation, not once, in years." And what she said next was even more revealing. She said, "I actually crave feedback. I want to grow, but no one is giving the feedback." So this is not a disengaged leader, right? This is a growth-oriented leader who wants partnership, not just approval. And when you do not have a structured evaluation, when you do not have clear governance guardrails or alignment around roles, it creates that ambiguity. And ambiguity at the board level trickles down into the organization. It affects confidence, it affects decision-making speed, and it affects how much authority you feel internally. So if this resonates for you, you already know what managing up feels like. It means offering board training on fiscal responsibilities rather than waiting for it to be requested. It means introducing governance best practices gently and strategically. It means bringing succession planning to the table, even when it makes everyone a little uncomfortable. So let's talk about succession planning for a moment. So many boards are behind on this. So if yours is, don't worry, most are, not because they're negligent, but because they are not educated about it yet. And I've been asked to give a lot of presentations on succession planning to boards and nonprofit associations. And what I do first is clarify that succession planning is not about someone leaving tomorrow. It's about continuity and it's about stewardship. It's about protecting the mission beyond any single leader. And when succession is unclear, anxiety rises, even if no one says it. So you're actively building the board you want, the board that thinks strategically, supports you decisively, and understands the nuance, and operates at the level your organization now requires as it's growing. And so now another unspoken experience as a CEO or ED that you may recognize is in my research, I was told that our staff feel whiplashed in a turnaround phase. This one is especially heavy because you care about your team and you want stability for them. You want clarity for them. But when strategy shifts, when funding changes, as it dramatically did last year for so many, when leadership recalibrates direction, they feel it. And you feel responsible even when the change is necessary. Another theme that came up repeatedly is, I don't want to admit the things I don't know. This one is so quiet and powerful, and it came up again this morning when I was having coffee with a CEO. Executive leadership carries an unspoken expectation of certainty. You are the ones others look to. You are the one expected to steady the room, and admitting uncertainty can feel risky, especially when you are the executive director, and especially when people are looking at you. And so imposter syndrome is real. That quiet voice that says, you should know this by now. You're the leader. You're supposed to have the answers. But you know what? You don't have to have all the answers. That's the truth. And here's what decades of research and lived experience continue to show us about this. The antidote to the fear of admitting you don't know something is not pretending that you do. It is transparency. When you name uncertainty appropriately, not chaotically without direction, but thoughtfully, you can really increase psychological safety on your team. And when psychological safety increases, the results or that performance will increase as well. People will contribute more fully when they do not feel like they are protecting themselves. One of my previous podcast guests, Kelly Duncan, said something that really stayed with me. She said, the team is always smarter than the individual. So that does not diminish your authority, it strengthens it. Because leadership is not about having every answer, it's about creating the conditions where the best answers can surface together. And that requires courage. The courage to say, I don't have the full picture yet, let's think this through together. The courage to invite input without abdicating responsibility. And the truth that no one has all the answers. No one. I know I'm kind of harping on this, but I really want you to hear this. I really don't want you to be afraid that you don't have all the answers anymore. And when you're brave enough to say that out loud with your team in a grounded way, you'll notice something shifts. You'll notice morale can grow, respect can deepen, and your team begins to experience your leadership not as performance, but as partnership. And as we wrap up, that is far stronger foundation for moving your organization forward in a way that honors your humanity. So if any of this resonated with you, please know you are not alone. You can find support by scheduling a Burnout to Boundaries session with me. It's a 90-minute session where we go deep into what your challenges are, what your desires are, and you come out of it with a 30-day action plan that is doable and some tactical things that you can really infuse new, fresh energy into yourself, because that's what your organization needs. They need all of you, but not in a way that takes away from your own health and well-being. So go to culturecares.com, click on Burnout to Boundaries to learn more about this 90-minute session. And I invite you to come back next week for part 2 of this series. I'm going to share more research results with you and how to reframe things in ways that will really honor your own humanity as you are leading the organization you care so much about. Always remember, you are meant for great things and you don't have to burn out to prove it. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Nonprofit CEO Spark. If you're ready to turn burnout into boundaries and build a healthy, happy culture where everyone, including you, can thrive, visit culturecares.com to learn how I support nonprofit organizations like yours. If this episode brought you value, share it with a fellow leader navigating stress and overwhelm. And remember, you are meant for great things and you don't have to burn out to prove it. Until next time, keep leading with courage and confidence.